Good morning and welcome back to Impactology Live, our second speakers of the day. We're very happy to introduce them. Paul and Janine. So Paul Gordon and Janine Robertson are the authors of Spenditude, a great little book that defines life-changing attitudes to money. Paul Gordon and Janine Robertson have been on a mission for over a decade to get people thinking differently about their relationship with money. They've had their own fair share of life experiences and events that have occurred, and they have run into objections a number of times, as we all do, of course, and sometimes there is plenty of inertia that comes with that. But they continue to have the same message and come back to that same message, and that is that it's all about your relationship with money, your spenditude, that makes the biggest difference. Paul and Janine have opposite relationships with money, but they agree on the fundamental, that your relationship with money or your spenditude cannot be underestimated. Last year they wrote a bestseller, Spenditude, a life-changing attitude to money, which we both have had the pleasure of reading. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Paul Gordon and Janine Robertson. Welcome to Impactology Live.
Thanks. I thought I'd take you back to the earlier days of why we're so passionate about this stuff. It was the early 2000s and I had a big corporate job and I was climbing that ladder, you know, that ladder that is a bit slippery at times, and I was too busy, too focused, and then one day I was called in to a room in the building that I was working in that I'd never even knew existed. It was a really small room and my boss was a really tall man. So he looked like about 9 foot tall, and sitting next to him was our head of HR. Now, straight away, I started to think, this is not looking so good. I started to feel there might be something wrong. And then the words came out, Paul, we are here too. And then my whole body just changed. My fingers started to get numb. My feet started to get numb. I sort of had this out-of-body experience. And in fact, my ego, which back then was quite considerable, jumped outside of my body and sat next to my boss and started arguing with him about the injustice of being told you're no longer wanted. And for 22 years, I'd just had my head down, my bum up, and was working. And then all of a sudden, it stopped. Pack your bags, see you later. I must say, it was a major impact on me and a life-changing event. I felt quite fragile. But then, after I'd realised that this is a reality, some good things happened. I reintroduced myself to my family, which was wonderful. I even went on a train to the middle of the Australian desert with my dad, and that was wonderful too. But the biggest impact, looking back, and something that has actually driven this whole idea of behaviour to money, is that I realised that my behaviour to money sucked, that it wasn't working for me. I made some terrible decisions, not only on that day, but all around that time. And I thought, this is just adding to the pain. And even in that time, I realised that maybe others have this same problem. I should have known better and didn't.
Paul, that just sounds like it really was one of your worst days, a really tough day.
Yeah, it was a real kind of light bulb moment for me. And I realised that I should go talk to other people and find out how they're thinking. And it was quite amazing when I started talking to people that I started to realise that people have very interesting behaviours to money, and also, and in particular, when something big impacts them.
All right, so on the back of that tough story, Paul really did learn about his own behaviour to money, and that's what we want to talk to you about today. We really want to share with you that the biggest influence on your financial well-being is your spenditude. We really want to help you to connect your head and your heart to your wallet. because having a better spenditude helps you have a better foundation with money. Now, Paul, that was your story, and that was a real impact moment in your life where, a life event and some new ideas came crashing together. When you heard the word Impactology, what were you thinking?
Oh, I remember it well. George rang me with one of his ideas, and I thought, here we go. And when he said it to me, the first thing I thought was two asteroids smashing together, and they're sort of breaking up and going their own way in separate but sometimes together pieces. And sometimes that's good, and sometimes it isn't. And then my second thought was two ideas smashing together.
Mm-hmm.
And with two ideas, all sorts of wonderful things can happen. So I really liked the idea. What about you?
I think I really liked the idea of the two words coming together, the Impactology, in the same kind of way that Spenditude brings two words together, your spending and your attitude.
And your impact and your ology.
Correct.
And look, when we were talking to a publisher about this book that we wrote, they explained that the mushing of two words together is a portmanteau.
Correct.
So we started to think, well, what other portmanteaus are there out there? And
there's so many.
There's so many, like staycation, which is what we're all getting used to.
Frenemy.
Frenemy, yeah.
Money could be your frenemy.
Yeah, so Impactology. And I just wanted to relate back to Nick's session that was on just before us. Nick talked about major events in his life that made him feel like he needed to help others. And I really related to that in relation to the major event that I shared. I've had other major events, but we don't have all day. But that one really did hit home that behaviour to money can really throw you off the edge, and it's not good to not understand it, particularly if you're a parent trying to influence others.
Right, so Paul, after that all happened, that was when we met and we started working together. And we were working in corporate Australia, supporting people who were going through these kind of money events and running programs around money. Now, through the global financial crisis, we saw thousands of people, and I think it really did feel like we were really making a difference. But the thing that we both just agreed on during that time was that the fundamental, when everyone that we were seeing was going through their own life events, was that attitude to money was just that foundation. It was so important.
Yeah, and when we say thousands, we do mean thousands from across all types of industries. So it was people on higher incomes, people on lower incomes, people that were working shift work, everybody. And what we saw was that there was three behaviour types that stood out. And that became the baseline for our conversation about, well, what is Spenditude?
All right, so Paul, I think we should go through that framework. But before you jump into that, I just want to tell everyone that all three of our behaviour types are great. They've all got really good points. There's always a little bit of room for improvement, no matter which one you think you are. But as Paul runs through them, I just would encourage you to see if you can identify which one you are. So Paul, do you want to run through the framework?
Here we go. So the first type is a spender. Now, a spender is somebody who has no real mechanical relationship with money. In other words, they're not looking at it and they're not reading about it and they're not really that interested in it, but they love spending it. And if they don't have the funds, they may borrow to spend. They just love the idea of spending. Now, at the very opposite end is a defender. A defender is somebody that knows where every cent is. And we talked to a fair few defenders around March, April this year, and they were clicking into action. They were doing their defendery things, which is really about just knowing where every cent is. They hate waste. They don't mind spending, but they hate waste. And they always have a safety limit. And sitting in the middle is a slender. Now, the slender is somebody that sort of oscillates between spending too much, but unlike a spender, they get guilty. The buyer's remorse is a slender's problem. Or they become good with money. In other words, they're sort of doing what defenders do naturally, but they can't stick with it. So what I'd say to all of you here is if you can't work out who you are, then there's a very good chance you're a slender, because spenders and defenders are quite distinct.
Now, on the back of those life events, Paul, are you willing to tell us which one you think you are?
I don't think I know. Do I have to out myself?
You do.
Yeah, so we talk about how you form your attitude to money very early in your life, and I think I formed mine by about age 2 weeks. So I'm a spender, and I didn't really realise that that's what I was until those big impact moments happened. But what I have done is adopted some defender habits along the way. But it took me a long time to work this out. And Janine, seeing I've sort of outed myself, what are you?
I consider myself a defender. And so I think the beauty of that is, Paul, that we have had some great conversations. You could even say arguments around the way we both approach different things. And I think that's the really great thing about Spenditude is that we really do come at things from such opposite ends and it brings a new perspective.
Yeah, it is, we were thinking about the word impact and we were thinking, how many times are we going to say it? Because we're paid $10 each time from Rita every time we say it. But we thought, here's the time to stop and think of an impact. And an impact is that there's diverse opinion on the same topic. And that's what we hear from people is that, I'm talking about how spenders look at things and Janine's talking about how defenders look at things, and not me or not her is right. It's just the way it is. I mean, there's some classic examples. I mean, there was one that I thought stood out. It's a little example, but it's a true one. We were just talking about speeding and parking fines. And, I've had a fair few of those because I'm in a hurry.
And I haven't.
And Janine's never had one. And I've been in the car with her, so she's no better driver than me. So I was wondering, what is it that stops you from having one?
I think going back to what you said a moment ago about hating waste. So I'm willing to invest time in doing something so that I hate wasting money. I don't want to get a parking ticket because it would make me feel really bad.
And there's a little but very distinct definition of the difference between how spenders think and how defenders think. And we've got plenty of those, but it's just sort of starts to form its way through. So, look, I talked about that big impact moment that made me wake up. What about you, Janine?
Yeah, I think everyone's had some life events that have made them think things through a little bit, haven't they? But for me, I lost a number of people close to me in my life in a really short period of time. And the impact for me was that I think my spenditude actually really completely flipped. I really kind of became a spender for a short period of time and I wasn't in control. I was spending and having a good time. I think I felt like life was a bit short. I would say, though, that the fundamental lesson I learned from that was that my defender behaviour was the thing that saved me from falling in a really big financial hole. And, it didn't last that long, but it was a really big kind of wake-up call for me to really think about how my attitude to money had impacted me through that time. So, Paul, when we were doing those programs that we mentioned before, we helped hundreds, I should say thousands of people through these big life events, and we heard some really tough stories. We really did. And I think that the same thing applies. What we saw with all of those people was that your behavior to money, your spenditude, impacts resilience to these big life events.
That's the resilience word. You'll probably hear it a fair bit over the next little while because it's sort of there and everywhere. But yes, we saw that those who had the more defender behaviour type were more resilient. So one of the tips we even give now to people is you may not be able to change your behaviour to money fully because that's your baseline, but adopt a few defender attitudes during tough times. And that's the trick. And we'll talk a little bit about habit change later.
So, Paul, I think the other thing that I recognized during that time was, what was I demonstrating to my kids? What were they seeing in this behavior from me? And they really were seeing this free and easy attitude to money. And at the time, all of them were actually 7 and under. So, one of the interesting things that came out when we were writing the book was doing some research and finding out that you actually do form your spenditude when you are quite young, actually before age 7.
Yeah, and you can't blame your parents for it, because I know
No.
you're all going, "Oh, it's just my parents." But let's do the sibling test. Have you
Okay.
got siblings, brothers and sisters? Think about them. Have they got the same attitude to money as you? Um, and what we find is the majority say, "No, my
Mm.
sister's very different to me with money." Yet it's the same parents. Well, in most
Mm-hmm.
cases, the same parents. So we don't think it's parents, even though they are high influences.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much in what they say, it's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the other things that form your behaviour to money young is things like, and you can see it if you've got young kids, they just can't wait for stuff. So that delayed gratification.
Yep.
Some kids can work it out that if I wait, I get more. Others say, I want it now and I don't care about more. That's a little sign. The other is just their addictive behavior. We form addictive behaviors very early. So just be on the lookout for when that happens. And often you don't see your child's spenditude until they start earning their first pay packet. And that's another sign of how they're going. Some kids keep their first pay packet until they're 40, and others have it spent within a day of receiving it. Behavior to money.
Yep. So I see it in my children now, and I think it really changes the conversation that you can have with them when you can identify it. I mean, it's a little bit like different children having different likes or dislikes or interests. They all have a different behavior to money, and it really can help you to have a better conversation with them. But the other thing that comes up often, Paul, when we're talking about this stuff in terms of age as well, is what else do we know about age with Spenditude? I mean, we hear things in the media all the time that millennials are a certain type of person, or boomers do something in particular. How does age come into this behavior to money framework?
Well, we talked to lots of different people at all age groups, and what we found is that we could really debunk that myth that age is a determinant of your behaviour to money. We had older people that were spending a lot, and younger people who were saving a lot, and vice versa. There was different behaviours across all age groups.
Yep.
What we found is the only thing about age, and a bit like my experience, if something big happens to you, you can often start to adopt some new habits. But, and one of the things we say, don't wait for something big to happen to you.
No.
Don't wait for the door to smash in your face before you change it.
Yep. So age is not related to your behavior to money, to your spenditude.
Not
I think
age at all.
the other one that people talk to us about is income. We're talking about money, and I think often we make these assumptions that if you're earning a bigger income, you must just be better with money. But we know that really not to be true, actually. So there was a study done a couple of years ago where they identified that your financial well-being, only 7% of that is made up by your income. Now, we've just seen lots of people from all walks of life, as you said, Paul, and what we saw was bigger income sometimes equals a bigger spending habit, sometimes equals bigger debt,
That
sometimes
that was me.
equals sometimes equals eyes too big for your belly, right?
Yep, that's true.
Hmm. And then the other part of it that I want to share with people is this idea that we all tell ourselves stories in our minds about money. So you might think that money is something that we shouldn't talk about, or that all wealthy people are happy, or that money brings joy. You might think the opposite. You might think that you've got this story in your mind that you tell yourself that you're bad with money. And
Yeah.
when we tell ourselves these things and we have these narratives in our head, it really does influence our spenditude.
Oh, and some people just don't think they deserve to have money.
Mm,
So they spend it because they don't deserve to accumulate it. There's so many uh, things going on in the wiring. The other one is around conversations. Every great civilization passes on wisdom through storytelling, a bit
mm,
like what we're doing today. Um, and it's usually storytelling told from elders down so we can learn stuff, learn life skills. What we've found is the story of money has become taboo and has sort of fallen off the conversation radar.
Mm.
We do talk about the mechanics of money. So we'll say, oh, that house down the road went for this much. Bananas are expensive this week. Price of this, that, and the other. But we don't talk about what's really important, which is how does your attitude to money serve you? How can you actually adopt some new habits so you don't always run into the same brick wall? And so conversation is really important, that whether you're a couple. And I
Mm.
think one of the things that we sort of noticed is that when a spender and a defender get married, what could possibly go wrong? Well, the reality is if they don't talk, heaps goes wrong. So we've got some tactics in our book around how to have conversations, whether you're a couple, whether you're single. It's interesting that the largest growth demographic is single people who choose to be single over
Mm-hmm.
40.
Mm.
So they need to work out who can they talk to around money. And then, of course, families and kids, which we've just been talking about.
Mm. And I think it really is important to have those conversations with your kids. Now, another thing that came up in our research, Paul, is sleep. How are sleep and money connected? Now, I think everyone knows that sleep is linked to your health, to feeling better when you wake up in the morning. I know that we focus a lot on sleep for our kids. We have all those processes and rituals in place, but we don't have those same rituals in place for ourselves as adults often. And when we were researching the book, we really found some distinct links between sleep and your attitude to money.
One that really stood out was this Duke University study that said if you're sleep deprived, you when you spend, you can only see the upside of the purchase. In
Mm.
other words, you're blind to the downside. So here's an example, and I won't say this was me, but it could have been. Um, Waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, pick up your phone, and all of a sudden there's some online shopping thing that you shouldn't have. And you think, oh, this is easy, hit two buttons and I'm done.
Mm.
But you don't see any of the downside. So our suggestion is, and we talk a lot about sleep hygiene and other things, and there's so much research on sleep hygiene and getting better sleeps. But
Yep.
the sleep bit is something to be aware of, particularly if you're a spender or a slender, that you are impaired in
Mm.
terms of your decision-making process.
Mm. So if that is something that you'd like to focus on, you can Google it. There's so many
Oh
tips
yeah.
and tricks out there on the internet if you'd like to improve your sleep hygiene, things around caffeine, alcohol, blue light, things like that. You could also read chapter 2 of Spenditude.
Oh, great ad, Janine. She
um,
didn't do this before. She's now learning.
um, all right. So let's move past some of those historical events and to 2020.
Wow, 2020.
Yeah, so the craziest year ever. What we've seen this year is that money and COVID are really linked. In fact, earlier this year, Beyond Blue, Australia's leading mental health portal, said that money was second only to loneliness as a cause of anxiety and depression.
Just think of that. You know what? We've proved that. We
Mm.
do a lot of workplace talks to employees, and this year in particular, and you can just feel the stress. And it mightn't be them because they've got a job, but it's somebody they know, their family member
Mm.
or friends.
Yeah.
And I think if Beyond Blue, they did that in what, April, didn't they?
Mm.
It's probably even more stronger now.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that money's being talked about a lot. If you turn the television on, governments are always talking about stimulus
Mm.
packages and entitlements and, recessions. And so money, money, money. And then in the family, there's talk of money. And then at work, there's a lot of employers that are looking at different ways and, reducing salaries, taking away entitlements, doing this, that, and the other.
Hmm.
So we kind of feel as though money has in 2020 has become sort of omnipresent.
Mm. Yeah. Agree. But I think the other thing that's happened, Paul, despite this increased uncertainty, is that we've kind of all had a bit of a perspective shift. And that window, as you say, to perspective shift and habit change, I think it's really open for people at the moment. And what we've found is that people aren't looking to be wealthy. People just really want to have better relationship with money, better habits, less stress. People just want to have choice.
Can I just say that because I think that is something that we've worked out probably in more recent times,
Mm,
that this concept of wealth is actually a turn-off
yeah, it
for
is.
many people. What people want to have is a relationship with money that, as Janine has just said, um, takes some of the stress away and, most important, gives you some choices. And then if you want to be wealthy, that's fine, but it's starting with those fundamentals. And I think what we see is most financial education programs and even the stuff that's just talked about around money is all sort of focused to more on wealth and greed.
Mm,
And that really misses the mark in our opinion.
mm. So if you want to have a think about your spenditude, really we're saying it starts from that place of awareness.
Yep. And awareness is key to any habit change or behavior change program. If you look back to the early 1930s, the most successful program is the 12-step program.
Hmm.
And step number one is accept, acknowledge, and be aware of your behavior.
Hmm.
And we're saying, and that is so powerful. Don't bother about the other 11 steps if you can't get past step one. And it's the same with changing your behaviors, your habits around money, is to be aware and acknowledge who you are. And then you're on your way. And as Janine said, when a big event happens, like the world has had this big event, the window for habit change opens
Mm.
because you're ready for it.
Hmm.
You're not ready for it if everything's going well, but when something happens, you're ready. So our job is to try and show what sort of habit changes can be made to be less stressed.
Mm. But Paul, what we've all also discovered is that spenders and slenders can be a little bit more reluctant to learn about money. So what would you say to people that think they're a spender or a slender?
This is the best advice. So spenders don't like reading about money. They wouldn't come to a finance lecture and they wouldn't buy a self-help book. They're not barefooting or anything because of one reason. They know what they're going to get told. Stop spending. And so they don't want to know that. So what we're saying is that's the wrong message.
Mm,
We actually think coffee's great. You should buy more of it and you should contemplate your life through stopping and pausing. It's a meditative approach. So stop thinking that you have to not do things.
mm-hmm.
Just address your behavior to money and adopt these little habit changes.
Yep. All right. So that's really what we want that message to be. Adopt some of these habit changes. Adopt an awareness of your spenditude, particularly this year, because we really do want people to feel less stressed about money, particularly in this environment.
Yeah. And so maybe to just sort of finish up, and talk about our why. I
Mm,
mean, Simon Sinek, he always says the why.
mm,
And so our why is, yes, we believe that this works, this addressing your attitude to money, but now is such an important time. You know, the suicide rates in Australia for men aged 40 to 60 are the highest cohort,
mm,
almost 50%. What's happening? And I had a taste of that in um, my story earlier that, you can be under pressure and know where to go and no awareness. So it's important. The other thing is for kids, cash is invisible.
mm,
It's just been taken away.
mm-hmm.
Everything is
Yep.
on a card. So you're not seeing it like you used to. And the other one is that there's a lot of people that are on their own and
Mm,
they've got no one to talk to. So we think they should talk to us and learn some new habits so they're
mm,
okay.
yep. So last year, Paul, we were lucky enough to publish our book, Spenditude. But this year, our publisher asked us to complete an additional piece, which is a companion to Spenditude, and it's called Covidude. It really does centre itself in this idea of perspective shift and lots of the things that we've been talking about today. So I think I've got two things for the audience to take away. One is jump onto spenditude.com. You can download Covidtude for free. It's our gift to you, spenditude.com. Have a little bit of a read and see if you can take on some of these tips and tricks and habit change. And the other thing I would say is it really is important to get a good night's sleep. So see if you can put some time into that.
Janine and Paul, thank you so much. I've heard the Spenditude story a number of times, as you're both aware, but every time I hear the two of you discuss the concept and discuss the habits and what it means to understand your attitude to money, I always pick up something new. So thank you so much for someone who has not only read the book, but I reference the book, I won't say regularly, but I do reference the book when I've got thoughts that are probably challenging me. So thank you so much for your presentation today. But you have blown up Facebook in regards to questions. So I'd like
Really?
to
Awesome.
we have.
We love questions because it means people are thinking about it.
Well, we've got some questions, but I'm going to direct some directly to Paul and others to Janine, and I think
Okay.
you'll quickly realise why I'm directing some to Paul and others to Janine. So the first question is for Paul. What was the worst financial decision you've made? And that was from Bill.
Oh, Bill, that's a really good question. Can I have two parts to that answer? Because the first part is waiting so long to address my attitude to money and just freelancing for way too long, which put me behind. And the second one, without a doubt, was getting divorced. It's a wealth depreciation strategy, if ever there was one. My ex-wife and I are great mates now, but at the time that was pretty tough, and your money just falls out the window.
And one for Janine. If you had $1,000, what would you spend it on? And that is from Bianca.
Okay, so we're heading into Christmas and I am thinking about what I'm going to be spending money on. My husband and I agree that with the children we do like to invest in experiences. And the reason for that is I consider it a triple threat. So you get that enjoyment of the lead up to the event, you get that enjoyment when you're participating in the event, and then you get those memories. And I just think that that's so important. So I have been looking at what experiences we can book in for the kids over the school holidays. Also, we are a camping family, so I probably would invest my $1,000 in some better camping gear or perhaps a caravan park booking.
Time with the family, that's what matters. This question is from Carolyn, and I'll direct it to both of you. How do you think spending habits have changed now that it's so easy to buy online?
Paul, you had some stats on that the other day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were just looking at what people are buying online, and electrical items, so good old retail stores in Australia like Harvey Norman that's sort of always blasting get a TV cheap. That was really popular, and then now it's jewellery. So maybe that's because Christmas is coming. But yeah, I think the fact that money is invisible has just made our attitudes to money more stark. There's probably some latent spenders in the slender world that are moving into spending because it's so easy to buy stuff. So it's a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think we talk to people all the time, and sometimes you have parcels turn up on your doorstep that you can't even remember buying. I don't think that that's a great
reminds me.
position to be in. I really don't. If you didn't need it so much that you can't remember buying it. Now, I'm not saying not to buy stuff, and I mean, online shopping is super convenient, and I'm working and I have children. It's a great thing to do for Christmas, but I think we've got to bring a whole lot more attention to how we manage those purchases.
My next question is going to be directed to Rita.
Here we go. This could be the shortest 3-day
let's
session
go.
ever.
Yeah, it might be.
Spender, slender, defender, Rita. Packages rocking up on the front
That's
door.
unfair.
Yeah, have you been talking to Darren, my husband? Yeah, maybe you have. Probably a little bit. Sometimes defender, and sometimes spender. I would say.
That makes you a slender.
So what
It
gets
makes you,
me?
you're an oscillator.
Yeah, probably. And I think those late night purchases, that completely resonated, because sometimes you will, and some websites now are getting even more clever. They obviously remember your credit card details. You might be lying in bed or on the couch. And if you have that moment where you're like, I can't be bothered getting up to get the credit card, how easy is it on those websites where you don't even have to put the damn number in?
Buggers.
Yep.
They're
So-
sneaky buggers.
And so
This is all part of it, Rita. You've got to have this awareness that those companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars investing in how to get you to spend. They're smarter than us.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But then it feels like Christmas every day, well, not every day, but some days when packages arrive, and sometimes it's boring stuff, but sometimes it's exciting stuff. And as Christmas comes, there's more of those nice little packages, one for the kids, one for me. One for the kids, one for me.
Definitely a slender.
What you could do is you can get Darren to wrap empty boxes and just put them on the front, open it up and pretend it's Christmas.
He might be watching, don't say that.
Okay. The final question we have here is, and it talks to the writing process when you were writing Spenditude. Can you share with us how that worked? And given, and that's from Sue, by the way, and I'm adding on to Sue's question, and given we have a spender and a defender, how did that writing process work together?
That's a good question. I like that one. Well, when we first started out, we thought that it'd be sort of Paul writes the left-hand page and Janine writes the right-hand page. So it's sort of like crazy sensible. And as it turned out, it didn't work that way at all. We just started talking about topics and blending in how we talk here, which is to look at both angles, but with one voice. And we were just fortunate enough that this one voice didn't sound like it was sort of going from one thing to the other. It was just sort of contemplating stuff. So I think that was a bit of good luck, I think, because it could have gone to be, just two voices, and I'm not sure how that would have gone. But even with our presentations these days, I'm almost the spender's advocate, jumping in to defend them and and talk about how they think. And
I'm the sensible one.
And you're the sensible one.
Now we're going to have a bit more fun. Not that it hasn't been fun up to this point. I've got a question for Janine first, and then I'll ask the same question to Paul. So Janine, if you were on a video call with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you provide young Janine?
Okay, I was thinking about this. I think I would tell myself to trust in my ability to make the right decisions, to really believe in myself. I think being a defender, I'm probably someone that wouldn't get into too much trouble with money because I would make some decisions to stop that ahead of time. And so I think I probably need to believe in myself a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you. Paul?
I'd be ringing myself in a pub somewhere probably at 18, so it'd be loud. I think the thing I'd say to myself is understand one thing, and that is Albert Einstein. And old Albert, he talked about compound interest. And look, I was not interested in compound interest. I didn't even really think about it for a minute. But at 18, just imagine if you understood the magic of compound interest and that alone, and you would be in a fantastic place. By the time you were 28, you'd be almost sorted. whereas some people at 48 are still wondering what compound interest is. So that would be my gift to me as I'm ordering another schooner.
Wonderful. And we're going to play a game of word association now. When I say a word, if you can share the first word that comes into mind, we'll get Janine to say first, and then Paul, you jump in second. Okay. So we're ready?
I'm a bit worried. Yep.
Ready? Okay.
About me.
Money.
Spenditude.
Challenging.
Music.
Love. Dancing with my children. That wasn't one word.
Feeling.
Bad habits.
My
Billy
son's
Field.
My son's nail biting.
Can't even defend himself.
Yeah, I'm just singing that Bad Habit song to Billy Field. I
Just say Billy Fields, it's fine.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Impact.
Impact. Can I say Spenditude again? I want
come on.
Spenditude to have impact on people's, really, that foundation, that baseline.
Okay.
Impact is. Is that a word?
Yeah,
It is now.
It is
Yep.
now.
It's part of the Oxford Dictionary as of 2 seconds ago. And finally, 2021.
Oh, the first word that comes to mind is uncertainty, but
That's okay.
that's a bit negative to end on.
I'd say caring.
Caring, that's a good one. Kindness.
Yeah, kindness and caring.
Paul, final one for you. Burpees.
No, thank you. They were invented by the devil.
Now, for those of you that don't know, Paul appeared on a Facebook Live with us a little while ago, and the challenge was on. And I said to him that I might, in fact, get him to do some burpees live today. But given that the camera angles are all set up,
Yes.
wouldn't be fair to our production crew. So you're lucky, Paul. You're off the hook today.
I've avoided burpees for many years now, and this is just another day of avoidance.
Well, you are both caring and kind with your time, and you have so much empathy to understand your fellow humans. So thank you so much for joining us today. Spenditude.com if you want to get the book. Highly recommend it. And here's to a successful 2021 for both of you. Stay safe, and thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you
both
so
for
much.
inviting
Thank
us.
you. Thank
Cheers.
you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Now, as Paul and Janine have dropped off the line, just a quick note that we have 15 minutes till Peter Shankman. So take a breather, go make yourself a coffee or a cool drink, and we'll see you shortly.